Hello and welcome to the second in our series of 4 B&G webinars. I'm Matt Freese and I'm coming to you from the B&G room here in our Fort Lauderdale, Florida office. We've prepared some content for you tonight based a lot on the feedback that we received from you after the first webinar. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off, we're going to have our B&G product director, Matt Eels. He's actually going to build a small NMEA 2000 instrument network. He'll follow that up on board his boat where he has some tips and tricks for setting up and operating a multifunction display and radar. Okay, after Matt's presentation, we'll come back here for a live Q&A session. But for now, let's send it over to the UK.
Today, we're going to look at a NEMA 2000 network, and we're going to start off looking at some of the basic components that you need to install a NEMA 2000 network on your boat. And then we're going to look at the overall architecture and then actually install some products, power them up, and see a working system. So we'll start off with looking, the sort of basic components that you need to get going is a fused power supply cable. And then two vitally important parts are what we call network terminators. Now these are small devices which you'll see in a moment how these interconnect, but vitally important for a valid working system is to have these two components. Then we have a selection of what we call T-pieces. Now these allow us to extend and connect the network together, but then the other part is that allows us to actually connect devices to the network, and you'll be able to see how that all joins together shortly. And then a varying selection of NEMA 2000 connectors. And as you can imagine, these go through the boat and they allow you to extend the boat, extend the network throughout the boat, passing through bulkheads and overhead cupboards and whatever. And then finally, we've got our 12-volt power supply. Obviously, for the purposes here, we've got a bench power supply, but in real life on your boat, this would be your 12-volt battery. Right, so we'll start wiring up the network. So first of all, I'm going to connect the power supply to one of these T-pieces, and that simply connects on there, like that. It's all screw together, so very simple. You don't need any specific tools so far. It's just a literally plug it together. Okay, so what we've wired up so far is a basic NEMA 2000 network. We have the linear backbone, which would run along the length of the boat. We've terminated the network at either end with the two network terminators, and then we've put in position a number of T-pieces which allow us to connect up our sensors and displays. So with NEMA 2000, the sensors are what we call active sensors. So there's a small PCB inside here and software. It's powered from the NEMA 2000 network, but then this device then transmits its data out onto the NEMA 2000 network for all the displays to listen to. This is an AMR DST810, which provides speed and depth and sea temperature. And to put this onto the network, we're going to simply connect it to one of the T-pieces. And that just screws together using the two locking rings, and now that's securely in place. So that's one sensor. I can now put in our wind, our compass and GPS, and then we can start putting a couple of displays in. Obviously, when you're connecting up the network, make sure the power's off. We don't want to power it up while we're connecting things. So actually supplying power will be the last thing I do. Okay, so we're now in a situation where we've wired up our NEMA 2000 network, got our basic sensors on the right here, and I've added a few extra displays. So we've got the HV display, the Triton 2, H5000 graphic, and the Zeus 3, all of which are compatible with each other and simply sit on the NEMA 2000 network. The thing I wanted to highlight here was the importance of the linear backbone, the NEMA 2000 network. And it's important that we follow this linear topography or architecture, and then it's terminated at either end with the two terminators. What we don't want to do is start dropping cables here, putting extra T-pieces, putting displays here, and another connector over here and form like some form of star network. That will actually break the NEMA 2000 rules or compatibility and could end up causing network failures and obviously losing sensor data at critical times when you're navigating or sailing. And then what we've done is we've injected power from our 12-volt power supply here into the center of the network, and that will give us an equal 12.5 volts across the network and to each device that requires the power. If you have a large network, and obviously you're not limited in the length of the network, but you may find that you might want a power supply at either end, just so that we can distribute or equally supply 12 volts across the whole network. What we don't want is 12 volts at one end and 11 volts at the other. Once we're all wired up, we're all connected and we're all happy, then it's simply a matter of supplying power to the network, and then we can power up our devices. And once our devices are all powered up, we will do some basic diagnostics to make sure our network is happy, that we're not generating any errors. And then finally we'll do a source selection on our displays, which will tell the displays which data to listen to. And then we should be in a position to have a working sailing and instrument system and ready to go. Our network is powered up, our displays have got power, our chart plotter's got power, but as you'll notice here on our display, we've got invalid data. And the reason being is that we need to tell the system which sensors to listen to in order to get wind, speed, and depth. But the first thing I'm going to do is just check our NEMA 2000 network and just make sure that we're wired up correctly and there's no reported errors. And to do that, I'm going to use the Zeus 3 here, and I'm going to go into the settings menu, and I'm going to come down to network, and I'm going to go to diagnostics. And what that does, it'll give me a list of statistics on what's going on our network, so we can look at the number of messages that we're receiving, the number of messages we're transmitting, the actual load on the network, and we're running currently around at sort of probably averaging around 10% there, so plenty of bandwidth. We don't have any fast packet errors, and we don't have any errors here being reported. The second thing I'm going to check is the device list. Okay, so the other reason for coming into the device list is not only to check that all my sensors and displays are connected that I'm expecting, but I can also take it one step further and actually interrogate the device itself. So for example, if I look at the DST-810, which is supplying our depth and speed, I can come in and see the depth, the device information. So again, if I need to know what the software version is, I might need to do a software update. The other thing I can do is I can interrogate the data that's coming out of that sensor. And here you can see that we've got 5 pieces of data that this depth sensor or speed depth sensor is actually transmitting. So it's currently showing me it's transmitting a minus 1.4 meters for the depth offset to offset my keel. I've got a water speed for the log, and I've got a sea temperature, and I've got a log distance as well. And finally, if I spin the paddle wheel on the sensor itself, then I've got a valid boat speed or speed through the water coming out as well. So everything there looking good, and I can do the same for the wind. I can come in, I can look at the data, and here we've got an apparent wind angle and apparent wind speed, and then for the wireless wind sensor, I can also show the charge status. So some useful diagnostics data there for fault finding if you're in the future, if your sensor's not reporting the data that you're expecting. But it also gives us a level of confidence to know that our NEMA 2000 network is now installed and working. So I'm going to come out of here now. And the final thing I'm going to do is do a source selection. So source selection allows us to synchronize all the displays so that they listen to the same sensors when they're showing their data. So what we don't want is displays showing different data from different sensors. We want them all to synchronize and show the same source of data. And this is important on an NEMA 2000 network because it's quite often you can have two sources of heading for compass or multiple GPS antennas or even multiple boat speed sensors. If we look at the compass, you can see here that I've got two sources of heading data. I've got a precision 9 compass and I've also got the ZG100. And what I can do is I can toggle and select which data I want everyone to listen to and calculate. And if they're using heading data in any of their calculations, then this is the source of data. So I'm going to select the ZG100 here. Now I can go through and manually select all my sources. And once it's completed, you can now see that we have valid data on all our displays and they're all synchronized and listening to the same data. Okay, so we've got our basic sailing instrument system here in place with our wind, our speed, our depth, and our GPS and compass giving us our navigation device. Now, in the future, I might want to expand and enhance my system, and one of those options is the H5000 sailing processor. And again, that simply drops down onto the NEMA 2000 network like any of the other products and has a separate power supply this time, and that can simply connect up there. And what the sailing processor does, it allows us to do some advanced calibration on our system to get more accurate true wind. We've got a number of connectors in here which allow us to integrate third-party sensors, whether that's NEMA 183, analog, or a man overboard button, and various air and sea temperatures. We're on the boat now and I've powered up my system, and I'm going to use a Vulcan 12 to demonstrate some of the features of the Chartplotter, or MFD, multifunction display as we call it. And we're going to go through some of the charting features, the settings, and some of the key operations, just so that you can understand a little bit more about the user interface and the user experience. So the first thing I wanted to highlight to you is the context sensitive menu, which is in the top right here. You'll notice that there's an orange border around the chart, and if I touch the data bar, that's now showing around the data bar. So that means that I'm now focused. I've changed my focus on the UI to be the data bar, or I can change it to be the chart itself. Whatever I've selected focus on, the menu at the top right here actually is context sensitive. So this is showing me a set of features or a set of options which allow me to control what I see and show on the chart, or what I can do, whether I want to add a new waypoint or measure, or I might go into new options and I might look at some of the chart options. I might turn on the photo overlay, or we might have the high-res bathy, which gives us a bit more detail on the chart and the depth. And I can see how much, or expose how much cartography and how many objects on the chart. So at the moment I'm running at full, but I can easily change it to medium or low, and that will change the amount of data that I see on the screen. I'm just going to come back out here. If I select the data bar now, and again select the context menu, we now see a different set of menu options here. And this allows me to turn the second data bar on, for example. So I can now see two data bars. I'm going to turn that off. Or I may want to edit, in which case I can now go and change the data types or the variables that we want to see. So for example, I might not want to see air temperature, and I can come down here and, for example, I might find that my boat speed is important, in which case I've now changed it to boat speed, and I can finish editing, and now that's changed permanently. The other thing I wanted to highlight here is the home button on the top left. So if I press that, now this is showing me a set of panels. We've got the charting, we've got radar, SailSteer, we've got the race, instrumentation, autopilot. We can set up some time plots. We've got the advanced wind plot here on the bottom left and also forward scan. Once I'm in the home screen here, my menu at the top changes slightly in that I've now have the option to go into settings for the plotter. And once I'm in settings, then I can see a number of options here, whether that's for chart, radar, autopilot, navigation, units, wireless networking, and networking for my NEMA 2000. And vessels is for AIS. So there's a number of options here that we can go and configure, either setting up our chart plotter or affecting our system itself. So, for example, if I change the units from knots to miles per hour, then that's going to be a system-wide change, and that will affect every display, my Triton, my H5000 graphic. On the right-hand side here, we've got some options to allow us to sort of create what we call splits. So if I want to divide my chart plotter into two different views, for example, I might want a chart on the left and a radar on the right, I can do that simply by pressing the Add button. And we now have the option to drag and drop panels in, and I can drag one or more in. So for example, one I find useful is having two charts next to each other. And I'm going to save that. And I can create as many splits as I like here. So I'm going to add another one. And this time I'm going to have a chart, and I might put a radar alongside, and I might put a forward scan in here, and I want to see a wind plot. I'm going to save that. Okay, and there we go. So we now have a four-way split. Still got the data bar down the right hand side here, and if I feel like that this is too much information, then if I drag down from the top of the screen, I can turn the instrument bar off and actually go to a full screen, and it sort of just reduces that a bit of clutter on the screen, and gives me that wide view there now. By taking focus of the radar now, I will now have another set of options, and I have the ability to transmit. Or if I go to the forward scan, I've got another set of options. So quite a useful feature here to get that composite view. One other thing I wanted to draw your attention to, and that was the sidebar on the left-hand side here. And again, this is context sensitive, so it's populated depending on what products I have connected to the NEMA 2000 network. And as you can see here, I've got an autopilot. So by taking focus on here, onto the sidebar, now that is now exposed the pilot controller. And from here I have the ability to change the steering mode. I can engage the pilot, and I can go back into standby. And then when I'm engaged, I also have control over the 10 degree and 1 degree dodge buttons. I can see what my set heading course here, and I can see what my steering mode is. Next thing, if I again come back to this home screen here, then on the left hand side here, I've got a number of options. I've got waypoints, routes and tracks, and this is an area or allows me to manage my waypoints. I can create new ones, I can sort them, I can delete them, and this is where I'd come to manage those. Same for routes. I can again create a new route based on my waypoints stored in the system, and I can also manage those by deleting them and creating new ones. And also, if I'm recording my tracks on whenever I'm out on a passage, then again I can record those, and I can just decide if I'm going to display those tracks on the chart itself. Okay, so if I go back in pressing the home button here, this time I'm going to look at what I want to find out what next time high tide is or low water. By selecting tides, it's going to be searching for my nearest tidal station on the CMAP cartography that's on this product. By selecting the tidal diamond, I can then also go and look at others that are nearby. We get a distance reference from where we are. I can manage any alarms on my system. So at the moment I've got no active alarms, which is good. I've got some history here of what the alarm was and the time and date, and then I've also got some settings. Now I can now scroll through here and I can set a number of settings, whether that's a low boat speed. I could set a true wind shift or a true wind, high wind speed. I can look at how much fuel I've got. If I starting to get low on fuel, then I can get the system to raise an alarm for me. Voltage, that's a useful one. If my batteries are getting low, then I need to consider, starting the engine or recharging some way. There's a number of autopilot alarms. And again, there's a number of alarms that I can enable and disable here. Vessels, this is giving me access to all the AIS shipping that's locally that I'm picking up on my AIS receiver. In this case it's the V60B radio, and I can see all their ship information, and if there's one of particular interest then I can open it up and see a little bit more detail about it. And because it's connected to NEMA 2000 or to the VHF, if this boat is of particular interest and I want to talk to it directly, then from the chart plotter I can simply press call, and then I can initiate a call which will, using the DSC function on the radio, directly call that ship. And I can also do that from the chart itself. So if I come back out and find an AIS target, so for example I'm going to zoom in here to the marina and I select a boat, and I can then initiate a DSC call. And if I do touch the cursor on anything, then I get the lat and long, and also get the bearing and distance from it in the corner. And if there's an object on the chart which is of interest, so for example I clicked on that channel marker there, then I can bring up more information about it, and this is going to tell me what the buoy is, the colour, the lat and long, bearing and distance from me, and any navigational information. And at this point here I may want to do a go-to, in which case I want to navigate to that buoy, or I may want to create a new waypoint at that cursor location. So again, another great way of how we're using the cartography here to expand your knowledge and safety. Just going round looking at what we have here on the chart. So I might want to highlight the yacht club itself, and I can expand the information on the yacht club. So we can have a look at a bit about the information of the club. I can look at what services that it provides, and depending on your level of cartography that you've got, it'll even bring up a panoramic photo of the area. Under area, then I can also expose a number of other features. So for example, if I'm not just particularly interested in the yacht club here, but I want to know what's going on in the surrounding area. You may notice that on my chart here I've got a red cone that's protruding out the front of my boat. Now that's actually the forward scan. So that's actually telling me, looking ahead, it's a sonar that's fitted to the front of the boat here. It goes in a standard AMR transducer, and it's sitting alongside, just in front of the keel, looking forward. And this is scanning in front of the boat, telling me if there's any obstructions that I might run into. It looks at a cone at about 15 degrees down and 15 degrees wide. So it doesn't tell you what's on the surface, but it can tell you what's in front of the boat and below the boat. And rule of thumb is it can see about 5 times the current depth. It's showing it as red at the moment because it's obviously detected something that's underneath the boat in front, and it's probably some of the infrastructure that's around the pontoon here. So if I just come back out onto the home screen, we'll go into the forward scan panel. And you can see here that roughly 5 meters in front of me, there's something that's of interest to the sonar. There's this peak here, and that's probably some of the infrastructure for the pontoon. Areas that you're not familiar with, it can give you that little bit of pre-warning. And we're now going to have a quick look at some of the radar features, and there's a couple of specific Sail ones that will interest you. So as soon as I see the radar image here, the radar's actually in standby mode, but I can still see my AIS targets are currently overlaid onto the screen. So with the radar image in focus here, my context sensitive menu at the top here now gives me some options. And one of those that would be interest to sailors is the power save options. And what these settings allow me to do is set up a sequence whereby the radar will go into a standby mode, a power saving mode, and then periodically it'll wake up, do a number of scans, which is configurable, and then it'll go back to sleep. And during that process of scanning, if it detects any alarms, any dangerous objects that you might have set up, any guard warnings, then they'll also be raised, giving you that situational awareness. But then afterwards you want it to go back to sleep, and then you'll be saving power. So my standby period here is, at the moment, it's set to, we can go for 10 minutes, and I want it to wake up and I want it to do 30 scans, and I'll set that. The other thing to notice here is that I've got 2 radar sources, and this is a feature of the Halo 20 Plus. And what that allows me to do is I can have 2 virtual radars. Even though I've only got 1 dome, I've got 2 virtual radars which allow me to change different settings and arrange. So in theory I could set up a split, which I can show you in a second, and we can have a 2 radars scanning, and with 2 individual ranges, a close-up one and then obviously a zoomed out one. In order to demonstrate those 2 radar images, I'm just going to quickly set up a split panel, and I'm going to drag 2 radar images on. We'll save that. And you can see instantly here we've now got radar source A and radar source B. Okay, so let's go back into our single radar. And using the context menu here, I can start transmitting. We can now see our radar image. We have a number of settings here, and the first one that I'll bring your attention to is the mode, and that can be set to either harbour, offshore, weather, or for the fisherman, a bird mode. And we can override any of these modes by having our own custom settings. However, personally I prefer harbour and offshore. Harbour tends to be a little bit more sensitive, particularly in congested areas where you're going to want to know every little bit of detail about your situational awareness, whereas offshore mode will declutter that radar image slightly, so that we don't start picking up waves, and it can distinguish between what a real object and a wave is. Weather mode, well, this allows us to see on the horizon and see if we can track any storm sails. And what I'm going to do now is bring up the context sensitive menu. I'm going to look at some of the features that I can turn off to help interpret this radar image. And the first one, which is a feature of the Halo radar range, is the velocity track. And I'm going to turn that on. And what that does, it starts to paint the radar image with, and helps identify dangerous and safe targets. So if a radar target is coloured red, then we understand that as a static feature of the our surroundings. So for example, a mooring channel marker or a piece of land. If it's painted yellow, then it's a target that's actually approaching us. And then if it's painted blue, it's a target that's moving away from us. So very quickly on my radar image, I can now see what is static around me, what's approaching me, and what is going away from me. So we currently have radar A transmitting, even though we only have one physical radar. We've got source A and source B. And then by switching source B on, I can now transmit here. And I can zoom out to give us that high level view. And now we're actually scanning at 4 miles on the right on radar B, and then we're zoomed in at 1/4 mile on radar A here. Okay, so another feature of the MFD is, which can help you put the radar image into context of the land and features around you, is to overlay that radar image onto the chart. Okay, so once you're back into the chart, take focus on the chart. Using the context menu, we can go to overlay and we can select the radar. And then from the radar options, we can select our radar source, in this case I'm going to select A, and I'm going to transmit. And we should now see that the radar image is now painted over the top of our chart, and helps us put it into context of where that land and those objects are relative to us. Okay, thanks everyone, and thanks for listening tonight, and I hope you found that informative. We're now going to pass over to Matt Fries, who's now live to answer any of your questions that you've jotted down in the chat. If you feel like there's any more questions on either the subjects we've covered tonight or other marine electronics, then feel free to put them down in the chat and we'll attempt to answer them for you. So we'll now pass over to Matt Fries, who's now live to answer our questions. Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks Matt, and welcome back to Fort Lauderdale. We really appreciate those of you who emailed in questions ahead of time, and we'll try to answer all of those. There were a few that might be a little more involved than we have time to do tonight, so you may also, some of them we may go ahead and contact you via email so we can do a little back and forth and get to the bottom of it. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and start running through some of the questions. One of the first ones, we had somebody ask about entering 2 waypoints in a chart plotter and then having it auto route to give a suggested safe mode. And then can I go ahead and use that route to engage the autopilot and follow it around that route? So a lot to do here, but let me go ahead and start off by saying, showing you 2 waypoints and how to use our easy routing feature. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to put new route. Okay, and then here we are in Fort Lauderdale. I'm going to go ahead, I'm in the basin here, and then maybe I'll pop a waypoint out there. So obviously you see that we're running across land, but once I have 2 waypoints in, I can come back up here. I can click on easy routing and click entire route. It's going to go ahead and calculate that route, and it's done it. And what we see here is that we've got the route drawn in, and I've got a couple little, notice that we're green on most of it, but I've got a little yellow zone here and a red zone. So basically what it's telling me is take a little bit of a closer look at some of those things, how it did it. So I can see right now that I'm going to keep this guy, but what I'm going to do is maybe I go ahead and zoom in here a little more, and let's go ahead and zoom in a bit. And I might want to say like that guy, it has us cutting the corner here. Cutting that green can, but what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and just drag that out. It'll be a little safer and go around that buoy. I can go ahead and hit finish moving. So that one's out. Okay, it was a little nervous in here, you can see, because it was really close to this. So it had told me you may want to check that. So maybe I'll go ahead and drag this guy out there, keep it away from the buoy, finish moving. Now it's got to set up nicely in the middle of the channel. Okay. And then now that we've got around here, we're looking good on the end. Okay, so I can save this route. Okay, and it's going to ask me, maybe it's a Route 9. That's fine. I can go ahead and say enter. So now we have it saved. And let me go ahead and pull it back. So now we have this route drawn on our chart, but right now it's being displayed, but it's not active. So I'm going to go ahead and just touch it. There's the Route 9, and I'm going to go ahead and go start. Okay, and we want to do it in a forward direction. If you're coming back in at the end of the day, you can run it in reverse. So now what we have is we have that first waypoint in the route is going ahead and active, and that's what we're now navigating to. Okay, if I want to go ahead and engage the pilot, I can come over here and click on that, and then I'm in nav mode here, right? So in nav, and I can go ahead and engage in nav mode. So now the autopilot is steering to that first waypoint. Okay. The question also talked about, well, will the autopilot take me all the way along this route? And there's a couple things here that we need to consider. When the autopilot is steering along a route, it's basically not just pointing right at the mark. What it does is it minimizes cross-track error. So there's a run line between the points, or if you're just boat to a waypoint, there's a run line from where you entered, initiated that waypoint as your navigation buoy. And so what it'll do, if there's any side current, it'll adjust for that, but it doesn't just take a bearing to the mark and point the boat at it. It looks at cross-track error. Now, what happens as we get close to a mark is that there is a setting in here that that decides when you've arrived at a waypoint. So it's a waypoint, there's a radius, a waypoint arrival radius. And that's actually a feature that can be set up in here when we go into settings and go into navigation, and we have an arrival radius here. Okay, so this is where we can put in how close do we want to be to a waypoint before we say we've arrived, and go ahead and switch to the next waypoint. Now there's also a programming piece in the autopilot where we tell it, we have a minor window between 20 and 40 degrees to set what we would call the maximum course change allowable without user intervention. So for safety reasons, when you come to a waypoint, if the autopilot, if there's a big course correction over 40 degrees, then you're going to get a pop-up that said, we've arrived at the waypoint. Would you like to go ahead and advance to the next? So it's going to force you to interact with it. And that's basically just for safety. Now, the other thing that happens when people say autopilot is realize that when it's going to a waypoint, as soon as it gets that waypoint arrival signal from your navigation source, from the Chartplotter, it's going to go ahead and start that turn. So if you put a waypoint or a point of a route point, a point of a route right next to a buoy, we may go ahead and initiate that turn before it gets to the buoy, depending on that arrival radius. So you got to be careful, always be on watch. Keep an eye on what you're doing. I think that people sometimes say, well, I'd love it, I just want it to be automatic and I'll do it, but be careful what you wish for, because there are some safety concerns when a boat goes ahead and makes a course alteration, particularly a big one, without your keeping an eye out. Okay, so that kind of gives you a good idea. We'll go ahead and put it in standby of using our easy routing feature to put a route in. And what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and navigate. I'm going to cancel that navigation now, and then I can get rid of that route if I want to. I can go ahead and delete that, and we're back to, I've deleted it, and now we're back to our regular chart. I've got the boat right now in simulate mode here. We're sailing off of South Florida here. And the next question, I think, was, looking for basic instructions how to create a route and save it and pull it up later to follow it. Okay, so I've got something in here that's probably not in simulate mode that's giving me a GPS alarm, but we'll figure that out. So we just showed you how to create a route using auto routing, but you can also go ahead and put it in here. I mean, I'm sailing north, probably a little west of the Gulf Stream. But what I can go ahead and do is show you that if we want to put a route in, I can just come up here. I can go new route and then say I want to do a waypoint there and a waypoint there. I can scroll the chart. Maybe we're going out to the Bahamas, right? And I can do that, and then I can go save. I can give it a name if I want to. and enter it. I'm going to take the default name. So now we have this route. Okay, now at any point, if I touch it, I can see that that's route 10. Okay, and I can come in here and take a look at it. So I can start it, show if you have a number of routes in here, this will just take you and show you where it is on the chart. So it brings you back to the chart. Okay, so that route is now saved. I can also come into it by coming into here, and you see this waypoint on the left-hand side. Okay, and if I go over to routes, okay, so there's that route 10. If I click on it here, it gives me the route points, so all the points in that route, and it gives me distances and bearings. It also, with B&G, because we're working on a sailboat, we give you true wind angles on those legs. And then if you really want to, we can come in here and click race, and you can assign it a port or a starboard rounding if you want to, which is kind of a neat feature just for those. Sometimes if you're doing races with lots of buoys around the harbor, you can get a little lost track. And you know, there was something we used to use called the string rule, where basically if you went up to a mark, you wanted to round it so you didn't if it was a string, you didn't cross the string. But this will just help you to remember which way it is, because it can get confusing sometimes. Okay, so now this route is always there, and at any time, again, we can save it. We can come back here. Okay, and we can also show it. We can make it disappear if we don't want to see it, but it's saved in there. And at any point, we can go ahead and pull it up and use it again. Okay, so I think I'm going to delete this one because I have another question that somewhat is involved, and I want to keep a clear palette here for me. So a number of people kind of talked about SailSteer, and they see it, but they kind of want to know how do you set the screen up, and give me some examples of setting up some screens using SailSteer, and then also kind of show how it can be useful when you're out navigating. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and set up a kind of a page that I personally like. So I'm going to come over here, and these were our presets, and as Matt showed you, we can set up new pages. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to drag the chart in. I'm going to pull SailSteer here, and then I'm going to pull in, actually, I'm going to pull in the race panel, even though this is really good for cruising boats also. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay. And what I have here now is this particular part of the race panel, if I highlight it, is the what if. Okay, that's what I have checked off. There's certainly other apps that you can open up, but for this, I really like the what if. Okay, so let's come back here. Again, here's our boat. We're sailing north. We got breeze out of the northeast here. And let's go ahead and put a new route in. And say, let's go up here. This is a long way, but you know, we put this route, and then we're coming in, and we're going into the Bahamas, and we're there. So let's save that route. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and activate that first, activate that route, start forward. Okay, so now what we're seeing here is we actually, in this, we see the boat, and we see these ley lines, right? Port and starboard to get there. We see our ley line limits. And what we're doing here is SailSteer. I like to do it this way because you really get an idea of it, right? So the boat on the chart is pointing north. The boat in SailSteer is pointing north, okay? You see this green, this is the wind has been shifting, so our ley lines have been shifting. So this zone is the min-max ley lines that we've seen on starboard. And then if we were to go ahead and tack, you see the min-max port ley line that we see, okay? We also see true wind angle and true wind direction. We can see right here from the compass rose, it's about just under 50, and yep, we see 46 true wind direction, okay? We see this yellow ball right here, that's actually our waypoint. So from here we can tell we've got a lot more starboard tack than we do port tack to get to that mark. And we can actually pull that up in times on here if we want to as a variable. Okay, right here in the middle, this 0.8, that blue, nice blue arrow, that is the measured current. Okay, so that's not pulled from chart data, the tide and current data from the chart. That's actually a measured current. So we look at speed through the water and heading, and compare that to course over ground and GPS, course over ground and speed over ground from the GPS. Wherever those two vectors don't meet, that's our measured current. Okay, and that's a lot more accurate than what the chart, which has data from way back, doesn't take into lots of other accounts that affect tides and currents. So this is really the importance of having a well-calibrated speed sensor. Also, speed through the water is to get an accurate measured current. Okay, and then what I have here is this what if, and I really enjoy this. So what we have is boat to the first route point. Okay, and it's telling me port and starboard. It's saying heading, course over ground, because we have some current, how they're different. We've got boat speed because we've entered in our target data, and I'll show you that a little later. We've also got, it tells us what the true wind angle is. So this is a 45-degree true wind angle. We're sailing upwind, so it's kind of hitting the targets. Okay, we've also got distances and time, and this is current leg. So the nice thing about this is boat to here, but what about this leg? And so I can go next, and now I see that this leg from the waypoint 1 to 2 is actually going to be all port tack, and it's going to be about 56 degrees true wind angle. So a little bit of a fetch across the top here, right? So you can kind of plan out, that's still going to be tight. You might want to set up your jib for an outboard lead. So kind of a little bit of a cracked course. Next leg, right, from here to here, again, port, we're going to bear off, a little freer, you're about 80 degrees true wind angle. And then if we go next, now we're jumping in and we're actually sailing VMG sailing down here. So I got times on port, pretty much a split right downwind. That. So really nicely, we can go through and plan ahead and know what the conditions are going to be before we get there. If I go back to the current leg, where we're showing, showing the boat up here, at some point, as we sail up here to the west of the waypoint, this yellow ball, which indicates the waypoint, will come around. And when that gets to the dashed line, that's basically telling us that we're on the ley line and you can go ahead and tack. I mean, here we've got a pretty big picture with the, Florida and the Bahamas here, so we're well out. But as you move closer, this will go ahead and run around. When it gets to that, tells you that you're on the ley line. Okay, so that's kind of an idea of something that I might set up and find useful, where I'm incorporating SailSteer, but also have the chart. And then I really like that what if is a possible, you might think about setting up a display like that. Okay. What are the best mounting options? We have a customer that's looking at, they have probably a DST-810, which is a speed depth temp transducer, and they also have a forward scan transducer. And it's a pretty good question. So there's a couple things to consider. When it comes to a speed through the water sensor or boat speed sensor, you really want to try to get that on center line. What you'll find if you mount it off a center line, you'll probably find that when you heel over and sail upwind, that you're going to get a difference. So you might overread on port tack and underread on starboard tack. So I always try to encourage people to mount that right on center line if at all possible. Okay, and typically the fore and aft spacing, I'll assume that maybe we have a fin keel boat. So I usually go forward edge of the keel, about a third of the way from the forward edge of the keel to the knuckle of the bow is about where I try and look. Now you're going to have to get inside your boat and look around and find out if where you can do it in there, but a couple feet ahead forward of the forward edge of the keel. So I would first get that boat speed center on boat speed transducer on center line. Now it's a combination unit, so it also has depth. The nice thing about it is that DST-810, the frequency of the depth transducer is 235 kilohertz. And then the forward scan is 180 kilohertz. So we're not at any risk of interference between the two transducers because they've got a pretty good separation in their frequencies that they operate on. So I guess I would first look to get that speed transducer on center, about that fore and aft. The forward scan, I don't really have a problem if you were to move that. You don't really want to put it, right behind the transducer, right in front of a transducer. So I would probably take the forward scan transducer and offset it a little bit. Okay, this is going to depend on how VEED your hull is, but it does come with a fairing block. So very important that the forward scan transducer is mounted vertical, side to side in particular. It needs to be straight up. So that's where you use the fairing block if it's mounted off to the side. And then fore and aft, you still want to try and get it vertical, but we've got a little bit 0 to 15 degrees plus or minus fore and aft. We can make an adjustment electronically, but in an ideal world, it will be mounted and just coming straight up. So if that maybe, that might have ended up, if it was back a couple inches and maybe out a foot and a half, that kind of would be a nice setup on the forward scan. You also want to think about it. It's a 15-degree beam angle that goes straight down to just about straight forward. And Matt had mentioned it. So you want to be make sure that you're not blocking it. You don't put it next to a keel. Make sure, think about it, take a look where you're going to place that transducer and make sure that you've got that 15 degrees unobstructed view down and straight ahead. Okay, so that's a good one, a little tricky, and every boat's going to be different, but hopefully that helps when you make some decisions about mounting those transducers. Okay, I got another one. Oh, this was a good one. Yeah, is there a way to lock certain settings to an owner mode where guests can use the core features but not really change anything critical? And that's a very good question, and the answer is yes. We do a lot of our products on some of the charter fleets, and the charter companies really like this because they don't like the charter guests going in and changing things around. So what you can do is come up here, we go home, and then we're going to go settings, and then there's a PIN code. Okay, and we can go ahead and set a PIN code. I can do a 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's going to ask me to confirm. Okay, your new PIN has been set. So now if I get out of here and I'm looking at my chart and I come in here and go, oh, let me go ahead and work on the settings. I'm going to change the calibration. Basically, it does not let you change any of those important settings without entering the PIN code. Okay, so I entered it in, and it'll now let me go. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it, delete it, just because I don't want to keep doing this all day. But this is exactly what we had in mind, so that maybe you loan your boat to someone, you have guests, or you've got some crew that has likes to push buttons. That's a way that you can keep them away from those kind of critical settings. All right. Let's see. One is about saving waypoints. Oh, okay. Yep. So basically it's saying right now all the waypoints go to same location. Is there a way to set up separate folders for different waypoints? So what I'd like to do here is go ahead and I'm going to do a couple things. So there's only one place where all the waypoints go to, but if you want to export them, we do have a way to export them in zones, so that if you have thousands of waypoints, maybe you don't want to have them all in one storage. So I'm going to first, I have my micro SD card here. I'm going to go ahead and put this in, and then what I can show you is this would be a utility SD card. So if I come in here and then go to waypoints. Oh, I'm sorry. We've got them all in there. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to storage. Okay. So if I go to storage here, and then in storage, I see my memory card that I just put in. But if I go to waypoint, I can export, and this will export all my waypoints, or I can actually export a region. So if I click export a region, you see here, it's drawing a little corners of the boxes. So if I zoom way out, what I could do, for instance, is say, I want to take all my waypoints in Florida, and I can create a box around that, and then I can go export. Okay, now there's a couple of different ones. I'm going to do user data. That's typically if you're using all of our formats. There's some different one. That's the B&G and Simrad uses the user data, and it's got some extra information in there which could be advantageous. There's also a GPX, so you can export as a GPX file, which is kind of a very common file also. But I'm going to go ahead and click that, and then click export, and then I can go ahead and click the memory card and say that I'll select a destination and say okay, and then I could say, for instance, I could call this Florida waypoints. So and then enter. And then that would export just my Florida waypoints. Now, when you take that home, you could save it on, on a computer at home, and you can have them nicely organized that way. And then if you wanted to say your boat moving to Florida, you wanted to clear all your waypoints out from the Northeast, or maybe you're going down south for the winter, then you can just load the waypoints in for the area you're going to be. So, so there is a way to manage them geographically, and I hope that helps. Okay, so what else do we have? Oh, here's a good one. So when navigating in nav mode, if you turn off the autopilot and veer off course, when you re-engage nav mode, it tries to take you back to the original track line or run line. Okay, if there's a way you can automatically restart the track, or you just have to manually do it each time with restart button. So when I described before how when you're navigating a route, the autopilot is actually minimizing cross-track error. So if there's a cross-track error, is the distance off that run line. So if you were to say, let's go ahead and just give an example. So if right now we're not on this route, right? So if we were to go ahead and say we're going to go ahead and engage in nav mode, okay, I put up cross-track error over here. See, very far left. So if you were to say, okay, there's something I want to go ahead, there's a boat coming and I want to go ahead, you hit standby, you go ahead and go off. Now you're getting off track. So now your cross-track error becomes very large. You can, if you're in nav mode, when you go ahead and engage, there is a reset right here. You can go restart right there, and that will minimize cross-track error and make it 0 again. Okay, so if you go standby, and then when you go engage, there's a restart right in that autopilot controller here. So it's nice to do. So you don't actually have to go over the other way to do it would be if you came over here and then you went into navigation and restart over here. That's quite a bit more button presses. So it's actually in the autopilot controller on here. So hopefully that now that you know it's here, that'll help you make it nice and easy. So good question though, and it obviously tells me that you pay attention and really know how to use your autopilot. That's a good question. Okay. All right, so that's one. Why would distance to waypoint sailing be blank when chart leyline targets is set to polars? Okay, when targets is set to tables, the distance to wayline sailing displays properly. Okay, so there's something that I want to just kind of show you, and that is when we draw these ley lines, right? They've got to come from somewhere. So if we go into home settings, and then under chart, there's a setup here for ley lines. Okay, so click on ley lines. And here target. So this is for your particular boat. How does it like to sail upwind and downwind? So when you're in what we call velocity made good sailing, what kind of angle and what kind of boat speed do you do? So if I click targets, by default, it's set to manual where you have a single upwind angle and upwind speed and downwind angle and downwind speed. Okay. Now, if I click this manual, there is a polar function there. However, this polar, if you want to use a full polar file, you need to have an H5000 sailing processor connected to your system. It needs to be Hercules level, and that needs to be programmed with the full 10 rows of data for a polar file. Okay. So if you didn't have that processor with your polars and you selected polars, you're not going to get, there's no data there. So it's not going to work correctly. So if you don't have an H5000 Hercules sailing processor, you can come in here and you can click table, and then you can click edit. And now what we can do is for 5, 10, 15, to 30 knots of true wind speed, we've got an upwind true wind angle and an upwind boat speed, downwind true wind angle, downwind boat speed. So this is where you can measure in all that target data, which is specific to your boat. If you have an H5000 CPU and you're set to polars and you're not getting data, probably means that there's a formatting error in the polar file. So you may want to take a look, and there's probably no target data coming out of that. So it's probably you want to take a look at that polar file that you loaded. Okay, so that's a good one. Let me go ahead. What do we have next? Okay, so this one's an interesting question. I'm not sure I have a great answer. So what's the best way to set up different user profiles on the MFD? For example, we have 3 groups of people who routinely use a boat, and they each want to have different preferences, paired devices, et cetera, when they come on board. So on this one, I guess there's to some extent, I'm not sure, like paired devices, if you all have your phones and you like to pair them, they can all be paired and they'll be remembered. So you don't really have to say, if there's not a phone or a tablet trying to connect, it's okay. So you don't really need to have other devices paired. I mean, there is a way to save all the settings of the unit. So that's all the settings as well as all the pages. I think that might be a little excessive for you to carry around, save on a media card in here, all the settings, and have somebody, because you're basically changing every setting on the chart plotter as each person comes and goes. So I guess I don't have a great answer to say, hey, here's what you can do to have everybody has their own, everybody has their own log on and it goes exactly like they do. We do see that in some of our Simrad commercial products where they have different captains come on a vessel. And so they all like to just put their USB stick in and load them. But I'm not sure that you're overthinking it, that you may be just fine, and everybody's different phone should all be able to be remembered and connected up. So hopefully that helps you a little bit with that. Are there options to add custom branding or color schemes to the UI? So yeah, so let's take a look at this. So if I go into home here and I'm going to go to storage. Okay, so in this, if I click on my files, I can come down here, and this is one of the things. There's actually wallpapers. So wallpapers are, when you hit the home screen, what's the background paper? So this is a really easy way to go ahead and customize. So I have wallpaper 1 by default. I can view it, and it's actually a sail, and that's the background that we see by default. But there's some other ones in here built in. I can take a look at them. There's some ways if you wanted to, but if you want to, you can also come in here, and remember I put my micro SD card in there. So if I go ahead and memory card, I happened to jump on and I went to ASA and grabbed a picture from the website. And so I can view, there's a nice American sailing boat. So I can go ahead and I can click that and then say set as wallpaper. Okay, so now when I go ahead and hit the home button, come in, that's my custom screen. So maybe a picture of your boat, your family. You can do a little bit of customizing like that, which it's nice and easy to do. There's some other things that you can do to change kind of color pilots. I would try and recommend, sometimes darker pictures tend to work a little better for this background, but let me go ahead and pop it back where it was. We'll go here, home, storage, and then my files. We're going to go to wallpaper again, and I'm going to go ahead and put it back to that guy, put it back to the sail. A little easier to see and for the camera to see. Okay, so we've got that. Now there's a couple other things. Another thing in here, if I go home, settings, I go system and advanced, there's a user interface. And basically I can do some things like night mode. So night mode text color. So I can come in here and I can change the night mode so that when I go ahead and change night mode, let me go ahead and come out of here and I'll give you a little. So now I change it to green, so I can set up that green on the instrument bar when I'm in night mode. Okay, so that's something where you can change the colors of night mode, give it a little bit of a customization. I'm going to also show you, let me take it out of night mode, back to normal. On the charts, what we can do is, okay, so let's go ahead. What I can do here is I can actually mess with the charts and the settings depending on what charting you're using. Right now I'm using we're using the built-in CMAP chart here. So let me go ahead. It's just getting rid of my dark mode. Let me go ahead and here, and I can come into here and I can go, sorry, let me go ahead, clear cursor. And go, I'm trying to stay out of the way. More options. Okay, so chart options. I can go chart options. And then what I have is I can come in here and I can go depth palette and shading. And these are both ways that we can adjust the thing. So there's some preset palettes up here that I can go through. So I can go depth shading where I basically say, hey, I want you to color everything deeper or shallower there than a certain setting. A certain color. There's a paper chart. If you really like a paper chart, this is designed to look at paper chart. Okay, we've got a traditional, and then we've got a safety saving where we can set the safety depth in feet. It's going to make sure it colors anything below that safety depth, make that pop right out to you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to our navigation, which is what we had earlier. There's also a way that you can come back in here and you can go shading, and you can actually do a custom, you can set up a custom page where you pick different depth contours and set up different colors. So if you're really into it, you can customize that. And then what I can do is turn on, there's an example of a very basic kind of depth shading. So lots of customization if you want to get into that. And chart presentation is going to vary a little bit depending on what chart you use also. Okay, so good question, and there's a lot for you to play with there. Okay, so I've got a couple more. So what would cause a combination speed depth temp transducer to show speed but not depth? New transducer, new installation. So you saw how Matt went ahead and in the video went ahead and connected. He had a DST 810. And one thing, I don't know if you noticed it, but he went in and clicked and looked at data. What he didn't see was depth. He saw a depth offset, which is a correction value. But one thing that has to happen is until in a brand new installation, say a DST 810, if you go ahead and put it while the boat's install it while the boat's on the hard, it's not ever going to get bottom lock. So it's never able to lock on a bottom and put out a valid depth. And what has to happen is the system has to see a valid depth coming out of that sensor before it says, okay, I saw depth come out of that. So there's a possibility that I'm going to go ahead and give that the possibility to be selected as a source. So my guess would be, because you're saying it's a brand new installation, that just be aware that you have to, once you install it, you need to put the boat in the water and it needs to lock on the bottom. So it needs to be in the water, lock on the bottom. Once you do that, it'll then be available on the network, and you can go ahead and select it as your source, and then you should see depth. So that's the most likely what's going on there. I think we get calls where they get anxious in the spring, they put their new instruments in and they start looking at depth while the boat's still out of the water. So that's why you can't source it yet. Okay, so what else do we have? Oh, we got lots of questions on software updates. This is a tough one because there's a lot of different products and there's different ways to update software. It's one of our most frequent searched in our database. Our support database is the one of the most frequently searched. So I guess I don't want to spend tons of time on it, but I think I want to give you a little bit of a background which should help you when you make decisions. So I guess first of all, what I say is, look, if everything's installed and everything's working well, and we all assume that when everything gets installed the first time, all the software is all up to date. So it's all level. It should all work nicely together. If you got a working system and there's no feature that you heard about that, is new that you really want, you can feel confident. You can leave it alone and just let it go, and maybe try and do it well, maybe once a year, maybe over the winter or something. But when you're ready to do software, you need to be ready to do all the software, because software from today on one piece and then 3-year-old software and something else, we might have done some changes where they have to talk to each other, and that when software is out of whack, that can be problematic. So there's a couple different software items and in Navico. So in B&G or in Simrad, I put an SD card in here. I want to go ahead and show you something. So if I come in here and go back to storage, sorry, I went past it. Okay, let's take a look at my memory card. If you're doing software, you actually always want to have a micro SD card, whether you're trying to download from the internet right to the unit, whether you're using the app to do software, there's a number of different ways, or whether you're downloading software from our website at home with your fast internet and then bringing it down, putting it in. But you always want to have a utility SD card in there. So we typically don't want to use, if you have a chart, we don't want to use that chart, the free memory on that chart. So get yourself a micro SD card. I have a little reader, like a little USB, very inexpensive. This thing's probably, $7 or something for downloading it. And the micro SD goes in the end here. So what I have in here, if we take a look at the screen, so I've got a Precision 9, so that's a compass, and this is a software update file, and you notice it's a swap.swup. And then I look at a Triton 2 for a Triton 2 display, and I got a standard, and it's a .upd. Okay, so different file extensions. The other thing, Zeus 3S, right? I've got a UPD, and then I got a ZG100. That's the combination GPS heading sensor, heel and trim sensor is a swap. So any files that are swap, basically that's software update files, those can be done via the NMEA 2000 network. And typically the reason why those were able to do that is those are smaller files. They're not as large and don't require lots of bandwidth to push it through NMEA 2000. Okay, so if you think about it, this Zeus 3 here, there's a lot of software in here. So it's a UPD. And so every Zeus, we need to go ahead and put the media in the unit and run it from the media. So we don't want to try and push it via NMEA 2000. NMEA 2000 is limited on bandwidth. You get big systems, you might be running at 50, 60%. The other thing is that NMEA 2000 doesn't have a standard for telling people to be quiet, go into maintenance mode. So if you have all B&G products, when you go to do a software update, all that will tell everybody, all the other B&G products, go ahead and quiet down and stop transmitting on the network. And so that frees up bandwidth to push this through. But there's no standard. So other companies don't know how we do that, and we don't know how they do that. So there is no standard for telling everyone to be quiet. Triton 2 actually uses it shares a lot of similar software as a Zeus, so it does require a USB stick. Okay, so Triton 2 and H5000 graphic displays require a USB stick into the back of them. Okay, MFDs require, let's just call it a micro SD, how you get the file onto the micro SD, but you need to put the media into each of the devices. Okay, so that's UPD file. Swap files, you can do through NMEA 2000. So you could do it from your Zeus, you can do all the other swap devices on the network. Okay, there's one other one which can be difficult in that, an AIS. Okay, our AIS, it needs to be programmed. It's programmed using a PC. It's also all the other manufacturers are actually also programmed with a PC. So if you have an NIS 400 or an NIS 500 and you want to do the software update to it, it is done via a PC. So you need the drivers on it to do the software update. Programming, also the FCC is involved, and they would not like you to do your own programming. So if you see an NIS, you do have to update it using a PC, and that's the same for all the other manufacturers out there as well. That's not just something we do. Okay, so I think that's it. I think we want to make some more videos out there to talk about software and kind of talk about instructions. It also changes a lot. We're moving much more towards now we can download software onto your phone, for instance, and bring it to the boat and do it that way. So things are kind of changing sometimes, but when you do it, be prepared to do everything. Okay, and if you're having trouble, give a call into our tech support, and they're happy to walk you through it. All right. Got a few more. I got one more I guess there was lots of questions in kind of talking about racing setups and some more advanced calibration or advanced calibration when you're using a sailing processor, like maybe an H5000 processor hooked up to the system. I think we're looking at doing a full webinar on that, kind of racing setups, calibration. And so I'm going to save those. This is meant to be more of a basic tips and tricks. So just wanted to acknowledge that we're hearing you, that you want that. And we're certainly going to go ahead and I think it may even be the next one where we're going to go ahead and kind of address a little more of the racing side of things. Okay, so that's kind of what I have for some of the pre-sent in emailed questions. There's a few again that I said that we'll probably get back to you via email if we have to go back and forth, because we're not really quite sure, what's going on. So that's what I have. And I think we have a couple, we've been trying to answer as many of the chat questions as we can, but I think we have some more chat. Maybe Sean, you can help me out with some of the unanswered chat questions.
Hey, Matt. Yeah, thanks so much for the info. Got a few questions here. First one, does the tide feature correct for your actual location, or does it just show what's going on at the tide station?
Okay, so good question. And let's go ahead and zoom back into South Florida here and take a look. So there is no interpolation, I guess, if that's what you were getting at between tide stations. But I guess I also wanted to make sure we know what we're looking at when we talk about tide stations. So here I am. I'm down in Miami, but I see this T here. So when I click on that T, oh, I clicked on I'm fat fingered in. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little more. And I'm going to block the screen. Okay, so there's the San Marino Island tide station. Okay, so this is built into the chart data. And this is an estimate, just like if you were to look up an almanac or a tide almanac. So this is just a guess at that point. And and it is right at that point. So if you're a couple miles away, it's not going to interpolate to where the boat is. But realize that that's kind of tide. You might have current arrows coming from your chart, but that would be different than what, for instance, we saw in SailSteer. When we see this tide arrow of 0.8, or if we come over here on the side, there is a variable tide set and tide rate. And that, as I mentioned before, that is boat speed and heading. That's a vector. Of course, around speed over ground is a vector. Wherever those two don't meet, that's our measured tide. Okay, and so that's kind of separate from that. That is actually measured right at your boat, and it's updated continually. Okay, so that's hope that helped on some of the tide and current stuff. What else do you have, Sean?
Next one is about VHF and GPS placement for best results. In this person's case, they've got a trailered sailboat and the mast must be taken down between sails. So looking for the optimal placement for VHF and GPS.
And GPS. Okay, so VHF I'll address first. And VHF is line of sight, and it really benefits from being the higher off the water you get it, the better off you're going to be. So even though you've got a deck step rig that you're taking down a lot, or maybe it's not deck step, you really want to get that VHF on the top of the mast. That's absolutely the best place to be. I mean, maybe if you're sailing on lakes and very low, maybe you could even use a handheld, but you're going to want to get that VHF antenna up the top of the mast. I would say that as far as a GPS antenna, you don't want to put it up the mast. So even regardless of whether the mast comes in and out a lot, I'd be looking at putting it, one common way is to put it on like a stern rail, right? They have rail mounts where you can put it on. You could also look at mounting it right on the deck. Some people even mount them under the deck. You've got to be a little careful. You will lose a little bit of signal through the deck, but on a fiberglass boat, it's probably not a problem. Certainly you wouldn't want to do it on a carbon boat. So I tend for GPS, I tend to look aft. If there's a spot on the deck that's clear view of the sky and it's protected, no one's going to step on it, or potentially look at getting on the rail. So GPS, back of the boat. VHF, you really want to get up the mast. There's potentially if you said you had you had something in the back, an antenna farm or a radar pole, where you can get it in the back, that's okay. But realize that height is really what height's what gets you the distance. So you want I would suggest trying to get it top of the mast. Okay, Sean, you have some more?
Yeah, so we talked about waypoints a little bit. Can you show waypoints, tracks, and trails, and most importantly, how to erase each of those? So looking to kind of get rid of those as well.
Okay. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm not sure how many tracks I might have set up, but I'm going home, and then I can go to waypoints here, and I see waypoints, routes, and tracks. So I have one waypoint in here, and not a lot. So I could always go ahead and I could go ahead and delete that waypoint if I want to right here, right? You can go ahead and delete. We don't have it. Routes. I have a couple routes in there. I can see I have multiple ones. So there's a delete. I can press and delete, or I can delete all if I wanted to get rid of all of them. I could delete all. You remember that you have the ability to export them also before you delete it. And then tracks are kind of interesting in that. So you can actually manage all of your tracks. So if you want to, here's a track 1, which is a track, and we can say display, meaning do we want to show it on the chart, and then do we want to record on it? Okay. And what happens if you just record one track all the time, and maybe you're going out and back and about, pretty soon you're going to get a big black, highway, coming in and out of your harbor. So what you can do here is you can say, well, I want to display it and I want to record, and then maybe you can you do a trip where you're really paying attention to your navigation, and you do a nice navigation, and then if you want to, maybe that's out to an island that you like to go and anchor off of. So you can go ahead and name that track, right? You can name it whatever it is, right? You know that little trip, and you can record it. And then what you can do is, you save it, and you can go ahead then and you can actually stop recording, okay? But when you go ahead and look at the chart, you see that track. So you've got a nice, easy highway for you to, a road, if you will, to say, oh yeah, as long as I follow, this is where I went, and I knew I was safe for water. That can be nice. So you can turn it on and off, and you can have many different, you can make as many as you want and call them different things. So all your different trips, you might have different tracks, which if you're going to a certain place, you could just turn that track on. So you're not cluttering up the chart. So tracks are really nice. And you can certainly come in here and delete a single one, or you can again, delete all. But to get in here, right, again, you're home, and then right at the top, you're going into waypoints, and that's where waypoints, routes, and tracks are all located. Okay. How are we doing? Still doing pretty good on time,
I think this is going to be the last one just because we're coming up on time, but we got a lot of great questions. But can you discuss the available cartography in a bit more detail? So the available cartography.
Okay. Yep. So, and I'm going to speak to B&G, some of our other brands, Simrad or Lowrance that do a bit more fishing. They have some, and we actually have the capability, but there are some third-party fishing specific charts that they're able to use in like an NSS or an HDS from Lowrance. But generally, if you're buying a B&G, if it's new now, it's going to come with a built-in, and that's what I'm showing here actually. And you see this plenty good for navigating. So it's going to come built in with a CMAP chart. And I would say if it's bought in the US, this is going to be perfectly good for safe navigation throughout the US. But if you're going to go up into Canada, or if you actually, we got some Canada coverage, but some parts of Canada, or if you're going out into the Bahamas, say you're down here and you can go over to the Bahamas, the detailed coverage ends there. So really it's kind of a US chart. So, and that will come, and that's built in, that's free. It comes with the chart. So, but then if you wanted to add a chart, you could look at adding CMAP, and CMAP is a sister company of B&G, right? So Navico owns, CMAP is another brand of Navico. So you could purchase a CMAP chart, which would give you a little more detail, give you a little more features, overhead photography. So it basically gives you, it would be a step up, and you could certainly do that. But we also feel like there might be places around the world with, say, Navionics charts. They might have real good coverage, and some people like them. So we're actually open. So you could use a Navionics chart in here and put that in. So We're open on cartography, and we allow you to use what's really appropriate. I would say if you're not sure, then I would certainly look at CMAP. But if you're in a place where you think that, well, you really think the Navionics has maybe better soundings in a certain spot, well, you could certainly run a Navionics chart and run that in our machines. Okay. So I think that's great. Yep, we're probably 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. So I think thank you all. Those were some very good questions. And I think now we're probably going to go ahead and wrap it up.